This is Max Loserman. He's what people might call the worst, possessing no positive traits and all the negative ones. Max will need to survive a full year in a particularly nasty version of the zombie apocalypse. Welcome everyone to One Painful Year, Zero to Hero Edition. The One Painful Year scenario was originally created by Twitch streamer Coaster. If you want to see the setup for the game, there's a link to a setup video in the description. I previously completed One Painful Year a few years ago, but this version hasn't been going great. Max's 12th life started in a laundromat. At this point, knowing how hard this would be, I made sure to put on the few clothes available and didn't pass up the cockroach in the trash. Food is food, no matter how gross. Zombies were approaching, so I had to leave quickly. Once on the street, I could tell we were on the main road of Muldraugh. Searching for safety in Muldraugh really only meant one thing, the farm, so I weaved through the zombies heading north. Once out of the bulk of the town, I veered into the forest to try and shake off most of the zombies following me. This was mostly successful, and when I thought I was far enough north, I turned east and headed through the woods to the farm. I ended up a bit further north than I expected, so I decided to loot the northern house, and found a whole bunch of canned goods, but no can opener. Without any real means to carry them, and currently no place to carry them to, I had to leave the cans behind. Heading south to the farm proper, I was disappointed to find a healthy zombie population waiting for me. I had to abandon hopes of getting into the farmhouse, and so I headed back into the woods. I went southeast to the abandoned Muldraugh train station, where I killed a couple of zombies and was able to acquire some warmer clothes from them. There wasn't much else here, so I headed further east and stumbled upon an isolated cabin in the woods. Inside was a handful of still currently useless canned goods, some equally useless fishing equipment, and some water in the sink and toilet. Also a zombie in the bathroom. I wanted to push further, but night was setting in, and Max was in no shape to go out in the blackness of night. Max's claustrophobia kept him from being able to sleep, so instead we just stood in the middle of the room all night. He would greet the next day exhausted. In the morning of day 2, the snow had already arrived and a sickness had set in overnight. Until it wore off, Max would be making loud coughs and sneezes, attracting zombies. After leaving the cabin and finding a road, I eventually came upon a rundown house and a mobile home. Examining the house, I discovered 2 zombies hiding inside. Killing them while being so tired on top of Max's general weakness took a bit of effort. The loot inside included some cigarettes, painkillers, and a bottle of bourbon. In a nearby crate, however, the real prize was found: a crowbar, a ball-peen hammer, and a shotgun. Crossing over to the mobile home, I didn't find any more zombies, but I did find out that this place was clearly meant to be a meth lab. Gas masks, surgical gloves, coveralls, and more guns and ammo were available. With Max's skills where they were currently, I didn't think I'd be able to make much use of the guns and ammo, but we'll see. I also found 2 cooking pots that I put outside to collect rain when it came. This would likely be few and far between, as we were in the beginning of winter and it was mostly snow. Figuring the claustrophobia would be a problem, I moved one of the mattresses from inside the house to the porch. It wouldn't be very warm, but at least with the overhang from the porch, it wouldn't be in the rain and snow. I spent the rest of the day foraging and found a few edible berries and some sticks that would be useful in the future. Sleep turned out to be virtually impossible. Max would snooze for a couple of hours and then wake up almost freezing to death, so I'd have to bring him inside to warm him up and then back out onto the deck to sleep a bit more. On the 3rd day, Max awoke from a bad night of sleeping on the porch. I was beginning to get concerned because our poor fighting skills were going to be made much worse by constantly being sleepy. I spent part of the morning foraging and found a tree branch and some sharp rocks. Back at the cabin, I made a discovery that the room we were in was actually big enough not to trigger Max's claustrophobia. Definitely a surprise. While I was in the process of puzzling this out, a zombie came for a visit. I knew that claustrophobia was dependent on the size of the room, but I expected it to need a larger room than this one. I wasn't going to turn down any slight advantages given to me, however, so I drank a bottle of bourbon and settled in for a booze-induced sleep. In the morning I used up the last of the water in the sink and headed to the road to attempt to forage for some more rocks. Upon reaching the road, however, I was greeted by a zombie. And as they are prone to do, one zombie turned into a bunch of zombies and I had a small horde to deal with. This turned out to be a pain with how weak Max was, but after dispatching them, I discovered one of them was wearing a digital watch, finally giving me the time and temperature. In the afternoon, I returned to the meth lab and put on a gas mask to provide a bit more insulation to Max's head. While foraging in the evening, I was surprised to find a ball-peen hammer in the dirt. On day 5, the lack of food was becoming a problem, so I attempted to head north to the small town of Dixie to loot the mobile homes there. This turned out to be a very poor idea, as I was nearly trapped in a mobile home while trying to collect food. In the end, I was able to escape with a couple of food items and was forced to retreat. Fortune did smile on me on the way home a bit, however, when I was jumped by a group of zombies in the woods that included a zombie wearing one of the large green backpacks. It wasn't food, but it was almost as good. During the fight, I also managed to reach the first level of strength, which came faster than I expected. I started day 6 with a little bit of foraging, then ventured back across the forest to the cabin we hid in on the first night. I knew there was some food there, and with our new backpack, I could actually move it. I still couldn't access it without a can opener. I took the fishing equipment as well, although I didn't have any access to bodies of water currently. I also filled the water containers that I had there. Back at the house, I ended the day with some exercise. On day 7, I decided to return to the farm. I had crafted a few spears from the stuff we had foraged up, and hoped that would give me enough killing power to loot the farm, as food was getting desperate. The spears broke faster than I had hoped for, and I had to resort to grouping up the zombies and moving them off into the woods. In the farmhouse, I was able to get my hands on a can opener, which, while not food, opened up access to all the canned food I currently had. While trying to loot the remaining food, the zombies found me and managed to give me a scratch. I managed to lose the zombies and made it up to the smaller house north of the farm that contained a small stash of canned food. On the way back to our house, the helicopter arrived overhead, so rather than lead it back to the house, I diverted over to the isolated cabin to wait it out. Much like my first night of this run, Max spent the night stressed out of his mind from his claustrophobia. Day 8 was all about foraging, and finally eating some of our canned food. On day 9, I finally moved all the loot from the meth lab into our house, getting everything into one place. I also spent much of the day alternating between exercising and resting. I finally hit level 1 fitness in the afternoon. Day 10 was a waste. Max spent most of the day just resting at home. On a foggy day 11, I decided to take an exploratory look at the train yard to our south. I killed a few zombies, but was met with more resistance than I wanted to deal with. So instead I backed out and went for the warehouse to the side of the train yard, as it's usually fairly empty. I killed a few zombies and found a trowel and a crate. I also found a few tasty cockroaches. I was able to fill up my water bottles, but the zombies started to get too thick for me and I ended up having to abandon and go back home. Day 12 was all about warmth. When I had been at the isolated cabin hiding from the helicopter, I had noticed the antique stove there. It would be difficult for a character as weak as Max to carry, but that stove would allow us to heat food and potentially sleep in the warmth. Max's cold with his constant coughing and sneezing was making life difficult, so the stove would hopefully be worth the trouble of moving. After filling the stove with wood, Max got a warm night's sleep for the first time. In the morning of day 13, I returned to the train yard to do the first of what will likely be many burns in this series. As weak as Max is, it really is the only efficient way to clear the large groups of zombies. So I spent the day walking around the train yard collecting zombies and burning them up. In the end, I didn't get to loot it all, but the groundwork was laid for the future. Day 14 was spent foraging and exercising. Food was starting to get dangerously low again, but not much I could do about it right now. On day 15, I did another burn at the train yard. This time it was complete enough to allow access to the train bunkers? Garages? I'm not sure what these things are called. Inside I found my first sledgehammer that I would have to leave behind due to the weight. I also found not one, but 2 garden forks. Garden forks function as spears and would give me some solid killing potential until they break. I also found a bunch of padded winter gear that will help Max stay warm through the rest of the winter. The day had gotten too late by the end of the looting session, so Max had to have a sleep on the cold, hard floor. Day 16 was Christmas Eve, and it wasn't off to a great start, waking up on the cold ground. I slowly made my way back to the house, stopping to loot a bit and fill our water bottles. A few zombies had to be dealt with, but by the afternoon, Max was home enjoying a Christmas Eve meal of freshly cooked cockroaches. Christmas Day. It snowed, and food was the name of the game. The garden forks gave me the confidence to head back to the farm, as I knew for a fact there was unlooted food there. I met some resistance from zombie farmers and was surprised to find potatoes and radish seeds on their bodies. Inside the house I found a solid amount of food, although I was interrupted several times by grabby zombies. In the closet, I located a Spiffo mascot head, which I was sad to leave behind. Maybe we'll be back later. Boxing Day, Day 18. I made a soup. I made use of the beans and lentils I found at the farmhouse to make a hearty soup for Max, and even cooked it in the antique oven. It was a good amount of nutrition, but it served to drive home how skinny and malnourished we were. All the food only put me at a weight neutral of 50, not gaining or losing weight. I also decided to plant a single patch of potatoes as I didn't really have water to support any more than that. Winter farming doesn't work great in Zomboid, but maybe it'll help in the long term. On day 19 I went back to the train yard, feeling bold with my garden forks. I cleared out the office building to the north, getting cigs and some more water bottles. I also swung over to one of the train depots and dispatched a few zombies I found inside. I began to check all the radios I was finding for the emergency broadcast signal, and managed to actually find a radio with it. Day 20 I experimented with dismantling some of the furniture in the meth lab, but found it gave hardly any carpentry XP. The slow learner trait was definitely a beast. I spent some time foraging and found some winter berries. They wouldn't solve my food problems, but every little bit helps. Despite having found a radio, I had forgotten to check it, and so I was surprised by a helicopter in the afternoon. I made a run for it, to try and not affect our home zone too much. The helicopter turned out to be a short one, with only 2 passes. Upon returning home, I found a few zombies in our space and had to deal with them before bed. Three more zombies arrived first thing in the morning. It was actually kind of them to wait until I woke up to try and eat my brain. Zombies can open doors in this scenario, so they could have just come right in for a snack if they wanted to. I put some light barricading on the windows in the afternoon. Day 22 brought good news and bad news. The good news was that sleeping with the stove on it provided the warmth needed for Max to get over his cold. The bad news was that the mohawk had finally grown out. No longer having a mohawk to protect, I had Max put on a warm beanie I'd been carrying around. I was trying to figure out why we were constantly getting agitated, even though I was smoking like I'm supposed to. It's because we're hemophobic. It's the blood on our clothes that's stressing us out. In the afternoon, I went back to the train yard to do a bit more clearing. I was able to loot another train bunker and find a wood axe. Day 23 is New Year's Eve day, and it's back to the train yard again. While clearing zombies, my final fork breaks. I took it away in hopes of repairing it at a later date, but we'll see. The office building is cleared and a number of cigarettes and water storing items are found. I've given some thought to moving down to this office building in the future to be closer to Muldrum, but I'm not yet decided. Moving with such low carrying capacity could be a bit of a problem. What might help is that in the afternoon I hit level 2 strength. and I worked my way down to the cars in the parking lot to see if any of them have anything useful or are functional. Sadly, none of the cars have keys. It gets too late to go home, so I spend New Year's Eve shivering in a car. Happy New Year! It's 1994, and I loot the remaining train bunkers. I have to fight the occasional zombie, and I spot even more sledgehammers that I can't carry. I eventually make it back to the house and do a small amount of foraging before the day ends. On day 25, the need for food officially becomes critical, so I have to take the risk of heading back up to Dixie for more food. I make a few spears, and they give me a bit of killing power for while I'm in the area. I'm actually able to kill a good number of the zombies in the area and make it in and out of the various mobile homes to collect the food. It's not as successful as I would like it to be, but it's certainly not a bust. On day 26, I made a realization. I had known my weight loss was a problem, but I discovered that it's worse than I thought. Max's weight is now 48, and I noticed that his very underweight trait has now been changed out for emaciated. I did not know this trait existed, and it turns out that it shows up if your weight drops below 50. It has some stiff negatives associated with it, including 40% damage reduction and a 30% endurance regeneration hit. After seeing this, I decided to be much more aggressive in eating the food I have in order to raise my weight up as quickly as possible. To this end, I head back to Dixie to loot more. I'm forced to clump up and move a group of zombies away in order to access more houses, but I do find a fair amount of extra food to take home. Day 27 is back to Dixie for a rinse and repeat of the day before. I clump up and move more zombies out into the forest, then swing back around to loot. One of the mobile homes has a large amount of canned goods. I'm getting concerned about this strategy, however, as I'm filling up the woods with zombies that could grab me on one of my trips back and forth. On day 28, I break out the needle and thread and spend some time mending holes in my clothes with leather strips. I won't do a lot, but every little bit helps. I have managed to keep Max's weight rising throughout the last few days, and have reached weight 49. Water is becoming a bit of an issue though, so I load up every water-carrying item I can find and take it down to the train yard to fill them with water. When I return home, I spend the late afternoon foraging and managing to find a few butte berries, a type of seasonal berry that is always safe to eat. Day 25 is all about exercise and food. By the end of the day, I check Max's weight and see that he has hit weight 51, turning the emaciated trait back into very underweight. On day 30, I decided to take a bit more of a final approach to the zombies in Dixie. So I load up my fire starting equipment and head up there. While setting the fire, I make the mistake of allowing myself to get exhausted and ridiculously tired. At exhausted, I can't run at all, and with ridiculously tired, I'm not regenerating any stamina, so I'm stuck doing the entire burn at only a walking pace. I have to admit I was pretty sure this was the end a few times, but this is a good reminder that even at walking speed, you're faster than the zombies. You just have to watch your positioning. It takes basically the entire day, but I make it through. We'll see how much of an effect that has. To add insult to injury, I get jumped by a zombie in the trees on the way home, and only barely manage to make it out alive. So Max has now survived his first 30 days of this one painful year. He's still a long way from the hero he'll become, and I think life is getting a bit better for him. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. I'd like to thank my patrons, who are all my little heroes. I am the Cremlin Archer. Thanks for watching.